The red dust of Valdris Prime swirled around the massive excavation site as 6 different alien species worked together under the pale orange sky. The planet had no name when they first found it 3 months ago. Now it was becoming the most important archaeological discovery in galactic history. Tae-ho Kim wiped sweat from his forehead and looked up from his digging tools. The human was small compared to most of his alien teammates. His brown hair was covered in red dust, and his simple work clothes were torn in several places. He had been working on this dig for weeks now and still felt like an outsider among the advanced alien species. Another fragment here, called Dr. Yuna Lee from across the excavation pit. She was the only other human on the team. Her black hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her dark eyes showed excitement as she carefully brushed dirt from a carved stone piece. The symbols are getting clearer. This civilization was incredibly advanced. Commander Veltar stood at the edge of the dig site. The Saurian was nearly 8 feet tall with green-scaled skin and yellow eyes that looked down at everyone with obvious superiority. His powerful claws could cut through metal, and his species had conquered a dozen worlds. He made no effort to hide his annoyance at having humans on his expedition team. "Humans work too slowly," Veltar said in his deep, gravelly voice. "My people could have cleared this entire site in days instead of months." Crystal Singer Neith moved closer to examine Yun-A's discovery. The Viridian looked like a walking sculpture, made of living crystal. Light moved through her transparent body in patterns that showed her thoughts and emotions. She had lived for over 2,000 years and had seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. "Patience brings understanding, Commander," Nith said. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "These humans may be young, but they notice details that others miss. This fragment shows writing techniques we have never seen before." Flux Mind. Zephon drifted overhead like a glowing cloud of blue energy. The Luminari had no physical body and existed as pure consciousness held together by electromagnetic fields. They could read energy patterns and see things that physical beings could not detect. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases," Zephon communicated directly into everyone's minds. "Whatever race built this place transcended normal physical laws." Tae-ho continued digging carefully around the base of what looked like a massive temple foundation. The structure was built from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered every surface, and the whole building felt wrong somehow. Not dangerous exactly, but different from anything he had studied before. "Tae-ho, come look at this," Yuna called out. She was standing near the temple entrance, which had been cleared just that morning. "I think I can read some of these symbols now." He walked over and looked at the carved writing that covered the doorway. The symbols seemed to shift and change when he looked directly at them, but became clear when he looked at them from the corner of his eye. "What do they say?" he asked. Yuna traced the symbols with her finger carefully. "Something about a test and a weapon. The translation is rough, but it mentions something that waits for one who is worthy." Commander Veltar pushed past them, both with obvious impatience. "Enough reading ancient scribbles. We need to see what is inside this place." The Saurian activated powerful lights that cut through the darkness of the temple interior. The beam revealed a long hallway that stretched deep into the building. The walls were covered with more symbols and strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Crystal Singer Nith followed behind them with her body glowing softly to provide additional light. "The energy patterns are getting stronger as we go deeper. Whatever is in here has been waiting for a very long time." They walked through several chambers filled with strange artifacts and technology that none of them could identify. Some items floated without any visible support. Others seemed to phase in and out of existence. Everything felt ancient beyond measure. Finally, they reached the central chamber of the temple. The room was perfectly circular with a domed ceiling that showed star patterns from an unknown time and place. In the exact center of the room stood a pedestal made from metal that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its surface. Embedded in the top of the pedestal was a sword unlike anything any of them had ever seen. The blade was made from what looked like crystallized light. It was perfectly straight and about 4 feet long, with edges so sharp they seemed to cut through the air itself. The hilt was wrapped in leather that looked fresh, despite the obvious age of everything else in the temple. Most strangely, the entire weapon seemed to exist slightly out of phase with reality, as if it was not quite in the same dimension as everything around it. "By the 7 suns," Commander Veltar whispered. Even his arrogant attitude was shaken by what they were seeing. More symbols covered the base of the pedestal. These were different from the others they had found. They seemed to glow with their own internal light and were clearly more important than anything else they had discovered. Fluxmind Zephon swept around the sword, sending out energy pulses to examine it. "This weapon exists in a state of quantum uncertainty. It is somehow both here and not here at the same time. The technology required to create such an object is far beyond even our most advanced civilizations." Crystal Singer Nath approached the pedestal carefully. "The energy coming from this blade is older than my entire species. Whatever race created this transcended physical existence long ago." Yun-Ah was already working on translating the glowing symbols around the pedestal base. Her excitement grew as she began to understand what they said. "The sword is called the Void Render," she announced. "It was made by something called the Architects. The text says it has been waiting here for countless ages, and that it chooses its own master." Commander Veltar stepped forward with typical Saurian confidence. "Then I shall be its master. My species has conquered worlds and bent entire civilizations to our will." He reached out with one powerful clawed hand toward the sword's hilt. The moment his scales touched the leather wrapping, every light in the chamber flared blindingly bright. Energy crackled around the weapon, and Veltar was thrown backward across the room to crash against the far wall. "The sword rejected you," Teho said with surprise. Veltar picked himself up with obvious embarrassment and anger. "Impossible! Nothing can resist Saurian strength." Crystal Singer Nath approached the weapon next. "Perhaps it requires a more delicate touch." She extended her crystalline fingers toward the hilt. The same blinding flash occurred, and she too was repelled by invisible forces. Fluxmind Zephon tried next, surrounding the entire pedestal with energy fields and attempting to lift the sword through pure force of will. The weapon remained perfectly motionless, despite energies that could have moved a small moon. "It appears," Zephon communicated with frustration, "that this blade truly does choose its own wielder." All eyes turned to the 2 humans who had been watching the attempts with growing amazement. 3 of the most advanced species in known space had failed to even budge the ancient weapon. "Perhaps," Yuna suggested quietly, "we need to understand more about what it means to be chosen before anyone else tries to claim it." Teho stared at the sword with growing curiosity. Unlike his alien teammates, he felt no urge to immediately try grabbing it. Something about the weapon suggested that understanding would be more important than strength. The ancient blade waited in its quantum state of existence, its crystalline surface reflecting lights that came from no visible source. In the silence of the chamber, they could all feel that this discovery would change everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. 3 days had passed since the discovery of the sword, and Dr. Yuna Li had barely slept. She sat surrounded by dozens of stone tablets and wall rubbings in the temporary research station they had set up outside the temple. Her eyes were red from strain, but her excitement grew stronger with each symbol she managed to translate. "Teho, you need to see this," she called out as her colleague entered the research tent. "I have been working on the larger inscriptions from the temple walls. The story they tell is incredible." Teho set down his coffee and looked at the papers covered with her neat handwriting and sketches. The symbols seemed to dance in the artificial light of their portable work lamps. What did you find? He asked, settling into a chair beside her. Yuna pointed to a series of translated passages. The race that built this place called themselves the Architects. They were not originally from this planet. In fact, they were not originally from this dimension. They came here from somewhere beyond normal space and time. She turned to another page filled with more translations. According to these texts, the architects were once physical beings like us, but over millions of years, they evolved beyond the need for bodies. They became pure consciousness that could shape reality with their thoughts. Commander Veltar entered the tent without asking permission. The large Saurian had been in a foul mood since the sword rejected him. His pride was still wounded from being thrown across the chamber by an ancient weapon. More human fairy tales, he growled. My science teams have been scanning that sword with every instrument we have. It is just an unusual metal alloy with some kind of electromagnetic field generator built into it. Crystal Singer Ninth flowed into the tent behind him. Her crystalline body was dimmer than usual, which showed she was deep in thought. Commander, your instruments cannot measure everything. I have been communing with the energy patterns in that chamber. This sword contains forces that our science cannot explain. Flux mind. Zephon materialized as a glowing cloud near the tent entrance. The quantum signatures are becoming more active. Whatever intelligence created this weapon is somehow still connected to it across vast distances of space and time. Yuna continued reading from her translations despite the interruptions. The texts say the architects created the Void Render as their final gift to the physical universe. It was forged using technologies that bridge the gap between matter and consciousness. She pointed to a particularly complex section of symbols. This part is fascinating. The sword was designed to cut through more than just physical objects. It can slice through the barriers between dimensions, through time itself, and through the fabric of reality. Taeho leaned closer to examine the symbols. What does it say about choosing a master? That is where it gets really interesting, Yuna replied, flipping to another page of translations. The architects knew they were evolving beyond physical existence. Before they transcended completely, they wanted to leave something behind for younger races who would discover it in the future. A new voice interrupted from outside the tent. Did someone mention younger races? They all turned as Jinwoo Park entered. The young engineer had arrived on the supply ship that morning along with additional equipment and research materials. He was shorter than Taeho with an eager expression and hands that were already dirty from examining alien technology. Jinwoo, perfect timing, Taeho said. Yun-Ah has been translating the history of this place. Jinwoo's eyes lit up with excitement. I have been studying the energy readings from orbit. The temple is broadcasting some kind of signal into deep space. It started the moment you discovered that sword. Crystal Singer Ninth's body brightened with surprise. A signal? My people detected no such transmissions. That is because it is not using normal electromagnetic frequencies, Jinwoo explained, pulling out a portable scanner. It is transmitting through quantum entanglement. The signal is instantaneous across any distance. Yuna looked up from her translations with growing understanding. That makes sense. Listen to this passage. The architects left the sword here as a test. When the right being finally claims it, the sword will send a signal to other hidden repositories. Across the galaxy, Commander Veltar snorted with disbelief. Hidden repositories? You mean there are more weapons like this one? Not just weapons, Yuna continued reading. Technologies, knowledge, star maps to unknown regions of space. The architects prepared a treasure trove for whichever species could prove worthy of their inheritance. Flux Mind Zephon pulsed with increased energy. The implications are staggering. An entire civilization's worth of advanced knowledge waiting to be discovered. Taeho studied the translated texts more carefully. What exactly does it take to be worthy? Why did the sword reject all of you but not react to us humans at all? Yuna turned to a section she had been puzzling over for hours. This is the hardest part to translate. The concepts do not exist in most languages. It talks about something called the spark of true creation. What does that mean? Jinwoo asked. I think it refers to the ability to grow and change. The architects write about how advanced civilizations eventually reach a point where they stop evolving. They become perfect in their own way but lose the drive to become something new. She pointed to another passage. Here they describe the test. The sword does not look for strength or advanced technology. It searches for beings who still possess what they call the hunger for tomorrow. Commander Veltar's yellow eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting that my people are too advanced to pass their test? Crystal Singer Ninth answered before Yuna could respond. Commander, your species conquered death through genetic engineering over 1,000 years ago. Mine achieved perfect crystalline thought patterns that never change or decay. Zephon's people transcended physical bodies entirely. We became exactly what we set out to become, Flux Mind Zephon added, with what might have been sadness. We reached our goals and stopped reaching for new ones. Jinwoo was studying his scanner readings with growing excitement. The quantum transmissions are getting stronger. Something is responding to the signal from deep space. Yuna found another section that made her gasp. According to this, the sword has been tested countless times over millions of years. Beings from advanced civilizations have found it and failed. Gods from forgotten mythologies tried to claim it. Reality-bending entities that could reshape matter with their thoughts were rejected. But no one ever succeeded, Taeho asked. Not yet. The texts say the final test will come when the children of distant stars arrive seeking answers. Only those who still carry the fire of possibility will be able to claim the architect's legacy. A deep rumbling sound came from the direction of the temple. They all rushed outside to see the ancient structure glowing with soft blue light. The symbols carved into its walls were pulsing in complex patterns that hurt to look at directly. The temple is responding to something, Crystal Singer Nith observed. The energy patterns are shifting into configurations I have never seen before. Jinwoo checked his instruments frantically. The quantum signal just increased in power by a factor of 10. Something out there heard the transmission and answered back. Commander Veltar drew his plasma weapon instinctively. Could it be the architects returning? Flux Mind Zephon swept around the glowing temple, sending out energy pulses to analyze what was happening. Negative. This feels different, older, like an echo from the past finally reaching its destination. Yuna was still clutching her translations as they watched the light show. The texts mention this. They call it the awakening. When worthy beings arrive, the sword begins preparing for the final test. Preparing how? Taeho asked. By measuring. The souls of those who would claim it, she read directly from her notes. The weapon learns about each potential master by observing how they think, how they react to challenges, and whether they still dream of becoming more than they are. The glowing intensified and then suddenly stopped. The temple returned to its normal dark stone appearance as if nothing had happened, but something had changed. They could all feel it in the air around them. The sword is ready, Crystal Singer Nith whispered. Whatever test the architects designed is about to begin. Jinwoo's scanner beeped with an urgent warning. Energy readings are off the charts, and something else. I am detecting movement in the temple. The sword is no longer in exactly the same position it was before. They all looked toward the ancient structure with new understanding. The Void Render was not just waiting passively to be claimed. It was actively evaluating each of them, learning their strengths and weaknesses, preparing to make its choice. The question was no longer whether someone would be able to lift the sword. The question was whether any of them would prove worthy of the incredible responsibility that came with it. While Commander Veltar and the other aliens spent their time running more scans and tests on the sword, Taeho Kim took a completely different approach. Instead of trying to understand what the weapon was, he focused on understanding who had made it and why. For 5 days he sat in the temple chamber studying every detail of the architecture. He measured wall patterns with simple tools, while the aliens used advanced sensors. He sketched the symbol arrangements by hand while they created holographic recordings. Most importantly, he thought about what kind of minds would build something like this. "You are wasting time with primitive methods," Commander Veltar said as he watched Tejo crawl around the floor with a measuring tape. "My people have already mapped this entire structure down to the molecular level." Tejo looked up from where he was examining the base of the pedestal. "Your scans can tell you what everything is made of, but they cannot tell you why it was made this way." Crystal Singer Nith moved closer with interest. Her crystalline body cast rainbow patterns on the walls as she approached. "What do you mean human?" "Look at this," Tejo said, pointing to the geometric patterns carved into the floor around the sword. "These are not random decorations. They follow mathematical principles that my species discovered independently." Jinwoo Park knelt down beside him to examine the patterns more closely. The young engineer had been working with Tejo for the past 2 days, combining archaeological methods with technical analysis. "He is right," Jinwoo said, pulling out his scanner. "These ratios match. The golden ratio exactly. And look at these spiral patterns. They follow the same mathematical sequence that appears in nautilus shells and galaxy formations." Dr. Yuna Lee joined them, bringing her latest translations. "That fits with what I have been finding in the texts. The architects wrote about universal constants that transcend individual species, mathematical truths that exist regardless of who discovers them." Flux Mind. Zephon drifted down from the ceiling where he had been studying the star patterns. "You believe the architects used mathematics that your primitive species could understand?" "Not primitive," Tejo corrected gently. "Universal. The same math that describes planetary orbits works whether you are human or saurian or luminary. The architects built this place using principles that any intelligent species would eventually discover." A new voice joined their discussion from the temple entrance. "And that might be exactly the point they were trying to make." Everyone turned to see a shimmering holographic projection of a woman in her mid-30s. Sora Choi appeared as a blue-tinted image transmitted from the orbiting research ship. The cultural anthropologist had been studying all their reports and recordings from space. "Sora," Yuna said with obvious relief. "I was hoping you would join our discussions. Your expertise in cultural evolution could help us understand the architects better." The hologram moved closer to examine the mathematical patterns Tejo had discovered. "I have been analyzing the philosophical implications of everything you have found. The architects seem to have been making a statement about the nature of intelligence itself." Commander Veltar crossed his massive arms with impatience. "Enough philosophy. We need practical solutions. My latest attempt to move the sword failed just like all the others. The weapon resisted forces that could crush a small moon." Jinwoo looked up from his detailed scans of the sword's quantum field. "Commander, I do not think this is about force at all. Look at these energy readings. Every time one of you tries to grab the sword, it does not just resist, it learns." "Learns what?" Crystal Singer Nith asked. "How you think, what you value. What drives your species?" Jinwoo explained, showing them his scanner results. "Each failed attempt creates microscopic changes in the weapon's energy signature. It is building a profile of everyone who tries to claim it." Sora's hologram nodded with growing understanding. "That supports my cultural analysis. Advanced civilizations tend to follow predictable development patterns. They master their environment, eliminate uncertainty, and create perfect societies where nothing changes." "And the problem with that is?" Veltar demanded. Tejo answered while continuing to study the floor patterns. "Perfect societies stop growing. When you eliminate all challenges, you also eliminate the need to adapt and learn." Yuna found a passage in her translations that related to their discussion. The architects wrote about this exact problem. They called it the curse of completion. When a species achieves everything it set out to achieve, it loses the drive to imagine new possibilities. "My people have conquered death," Veltar said proudly. "We have built an empire that spans dozens of worlds. We have achieved everything we dreamed of." "Exactly," Sora replied. "And when did your species last make a major breakthrough in science or philosophy? When did you last discover something that completely changed how you view the universe?" The Saurian commander was silent for a long moment. Crystal Singer Nith answered instead. "My people achieved perfect crystalline thought patterns over 2,000 years ago. We have not needed to evolve since then." Flux mind. Zephon pulsed with what might have been discomfort. "The Luminari transcended physical existence entirely. We believed we had reached the ultimate state of being." Jinwoo was studying his readings with growing excitement. "But look at what happens when the humans approach the sword. No rejection, no resistance. The energy fields actually stabilize when we get close to it." Taeho stood up and walked slowly toward the pedestal. He did not reach for the sword, but simply stood near it, observing how it seemed to shimmer slightly in his presence. "The difference is that humans are still changing," he said thoughtfully. "We still argue about everything. We still make mistakes. We still dream about becoming something more than we are right now." Yuna read from another section of the architect texts. Here they write about the quality they were looking for. They called it the eternal question, the ability to keep asking what if, even after you think you have all the answers. Sora's hologram moved to examine different parts of the chamber. Every advanced species goes through the same evolution. First survival, then comfort, then perfection, then stagnation. But humans are still in the growth phase. "We have not solved death yet," Jinwoo added. "We have not conquered the galaxy. We still face uncertainty every day of our lives." Commander Veltar looked offended. "You speak of these things as advantages. Uncertainty is weakness. Mortality is failure." Crystal Singer Nith's crystalline body flickered with new patterns as she considered their words. "Perhaps that is where we went wrong. We saw our evolution as reaching a destination. But what if evolution is supposed to be an endless journey?" Taeho approached the sword more closely, studying its impossible crystalline blade that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The architects evolved beyond physical existence, but maybe they realized they had lost something important in the process. "Like what?" Fluxmind Zephon asked. "The excitement of not knowing what comes next," Yuna suggested. "The joy of discovery. The satisfaction of overcoming challenges through creativity instead of raw power." Jinwoo's scanner was beeping with new readings. "The sword's quantum field is changing again. It is responding to this conversation. The energy patterns are becoming more complex, more active." Sora studied the temple architecture through her holographic sensors. The architects built this test not for their own time, but for the future. They knew that eventually younger species would find it, species that still possessed the qualities they had lost. "But why give such power to less advanced beings?" Veltar asked. Taeho touched the edge of the pedestal carefully, feeling the strange vibrations that seemed to come from within the metal itself. Maybe because less advanced beings are more likely to use that power to keep growing instead of just maintaining what they already have. The sword pulsed with brighter light, as if responding to his words. Everyone in the chamber felt the change, in energy. Something fundamental was shifting in the ancient weapons evaluation process. The architects were not looking for the strongest species or the smartest species, Yuna realized. They were looking for the species that would never stop becoming something new. Crystal Singer Nith's voice carried a note of wonder. "And humanity still carries that spark." Jinwoo checked his readings again. "The quantum field is stabilizing into patterns I have never seen before. I think the sword is making its decision. Teho looked at the weapon with new understanding. The test was not about proving worthiness through strength or knowledge. It was about demonstrating the courage to remain imperfect, to keep questioning, to never stop reaching for something just beyond their grasp. The architects preserved their greatest treasures for a species that would never consider themselves finished, he said quietly. They wanted their legacy to go to beings who would use it to keep growing instead of just maintaining power. The sword pulsed again, brighter this time, and everyone in the chamber knew that the real test was about to begin. The tension in the temple chamber had been building for hours. Commander Veltar paced back and forth like a caged predator, his yellow eyes never leaving the sword that had humiliated his species. Crystal Singer Nith stood motionless, but her crystalline body flickered with patterns that showed deep frustration. Even Flux-Mind Zephon seemed more agitated than usual, his energy form pulsing with irregular rhythms. "This is unacceptable," Veltar growled for the 10th time that day. "My superiors expect results. The Saurian Empire did not send me across the galaxy to watch humans play with ancient toys." Jinwoo Park looked up from his scanner readings with growing concern. "Commander, the quantum fields around the sword are becoming unstable. If you try to force it again, you could damage the entire structure." "Then perhaps it is time for more direct methods," Veltar replied, activating his wrist communicator. "This is Commander Veltar to Orbital Command. Prepare the molecular extraction beam. If we cannot lift this weapon, we will cut it free from the pedestal." Crystal Singer Ninth's body flared bright red with alarm. "Commander, no. The energy readings show that the sword is quantum entangled with the fabric of space around it. Disrupting that connection could tear a hole in reality itself." Teho. Kim stepped between Veltar and the communicator. The human was much smaller than the Saurian, but his voice carried surprising authority. "Commander, please listen to reason. We are dealing with technology that is millions of years more advanced than anything any of our species have created." "Exactly," Veltar snarled, "which is why it belongs in the hands of a superior species, not with primitives who still die of old age." A new voice cut through the argument from the temple entrance. "Perhaps that primitive mortality is exactly what makes us qualified." Everyone turned to see Hyun-Soo Kang walking into the chamber. The military advisor was older than the other humans, with gray streaking his black hair and scars on his hands that spoke of a lifetime of practical experience. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who had faced danger many times before. "Hyun-Soo," Teho said with relief. "When did you arrive?" "About an hour ago," the military advisor replied, his eyes taking in every detail of the chamber and the ancient sword. "I have been reviewing all your reports and recordings. This situation requires a different perspective." Commander Veltar's claws extended slightly in irritation. "Another human. As if 3 of your kind could accomplish what the greatest minds in the galaxy have failed to achieve." Hyun-Soo studied the Saurian commander calmly. "Commander, in my 40 years of military service, I have learned that the greatest minds are not always the best suited for every mission. Sometimes experience matters more than intelligence." Dr. Yoon-Ah Lee approached with her translation tablets. "Hyun-Soo, you need to see what we have discovered about the architects and their test." Over the next hour, Hyun-Soo listened carefully as the team explained everything they had learned. He asked few questions, but his attention never wavered. Unlike the alien team members who seemed to grow more frustrated with each revelation, the human military advisor appeared to become more thoughtful. "So the sword is not really a weapon at all," he said finally. "It is a key, and a test, and a philosophical statement about the nature of growth versus stagnation." Sora Choi's holographic image nodded from where she had been observing. "That is exactly right. The architects were not looking for the strongest species or the smartest species. They were looking for the species that would never stop questioning and growing." Flux-Mind Zephon pulsed with what might have been sadness. And we who have transcended physical limitations have also transcended the need to change and adapt. Hyun-soo walked slowly around the pedestal, studying the sword from every angle. In military terms, this makes perfect sense. You do not give advanced weapons to soldiers who think they have already won the war. You give them to soldiers who know the war is never really over. Jinwoo's scanner beeped with urgent readings. The quantum fluctuations are increasing again. Something is responding to this conversation. Crystal Singer Neith moved closer to examine the energy patterns around the sword. The weapon is evaluating us again, but this time the readings are different, more focused. Taeho noticed that the symbols carved into the pedestal were beginning to glow with soft blue light. Yun-ah, are those new symbols appearing? Dr. Yun-ah Lee rushed forward with her translation tools. Not new symbols, hidden ones. They were always there, but they are only becoming visible now. She worked quickly to decipher the newly revealed text while everyone watched in fascination. This section is about the final phase of the test. It says the sword will reveal itself fully only when it encounters beings who understand that true power comes from accepting limitation rather than transcending it. That makes no sense, Commander Veltar objected. Power comes from overcoming limitations, not accepting them. Hyun-soo shook his head slowly. With respect, Commander, that is where you are wrong. In my experience, the most dangerous enemies are not the ones who think they are invincible. They are the ones who know they can die but fight anyway. Mortality makes you stronger? Crystal Singer Neith asked with genuine confusion. Mortality makes you careful, Hyun-soo explained. It makes you think before you act. It makes you value what you have while still reaching for what you might become. When you know your time is limited, every moment becomes precious. Sora's holographic image brightened with understanding. And when every moment is precious, you never stop trying to make the next moment better than the last one. Jinwoo's readings were showing massive changes in the sword's energy signature. Whatever is happening, it is building toward something big. The quantum fields are aligning into patterns that should not be possible. Taeho approached the sword more closely than he ever had before. He could feel the power radiating from the crystalline blade, but also something else. Something that felt almost like recognition. The architects were not just advanced beings, he said quietly. They were beings who remembered what it felt like to grow and change and discover new things. That is why they could create a test that looks for those qualities in others. Yuna found another passage in the newly revealed text. Here they write about their greatest achievement, not transcending physical existence but remembering why physical existence mattered in the first place. The sword is not testing for worthiness, Hyun-soo realized. It is testing for wisdom, the wisdom to know that no matter how far you advance, there is always further to go. The ancient weapon pulsed with brilliant light that filled the entire chamber. The energy was not harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming. For the first time since its discovery, the sword seemed truly alive. Commander Veltar stepped back instinctively. What is happening to it? Fluxmind Zephon swept around the chamber, sending out energy pulses to analyze the changes. The quantum state is stabilizing. The sword is preparing to make its final choice. Crystal Singer Neith's crystalline body reflected the sword's glow in beautiful rainbow patterns. After all these millennia, it has found what it was looking for. Hyun-soo looked at his human teammates with new understanding. It was not looking for a master, it was looking for a partner. Someone who would use its power not to prove superiority, but to keep exploring the universe with the wonder of someone who knows they still have everything to learn. The sword's glow intensified, and everyone in the chamber felt a profound sense of anticipation. The ancient test was reaching its conclusion, and they all knew that whatever happened next would change the course of galactic history. Taeho stood before the weapon, feeling not triumph or excitement, but a deep sense of responsibility. The architects had waited millions of years for this moment. The question was whether humanity was truly ready for what they had preserved. The chamber fell completely silent as Taeho Kim stepped forward. The ancient sword pulsed with gentle light that seemed to welcome his approach, rather than warn him away. Behind him, the alien team members watched with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. "Taeho, wait," Dr. Yuna Lee called out softly. "Are you sure about this?" He paused and looked back at his human colleagues. Jinwoo Park had his scanner ready to record whatever happened. Hyun Soo Kang stood with military bearing, but his eyes showed concern for his teammate. So-Ra Choi's holographic image flickered with worry transmitted from the orbiting ship. "I am not sure about anything," Taeho admitted honestly. "But that might be exactly what this test requires." Commander Veltar crossed his massive arms. "If a human can lift that sword when the greatest warriors in the galaxy cannot, then the universe makes no sense." Crystal Singer Nith's crystalline body pulsed with gentle light. "Perhaps, Commander, that is the point. Perhaps the universe is larger and stranger than any of us imagined." Taeho turned back toward the pedestal. The sword seemed to call to him, but not with promises of power or glory. Instead, it seemed to offer something much more precious, the chance to keep learning and growing even while wielding forces that could reshape reality. He began removing his protective gear piece by piece. First the radiation detector, then the atmospheric filter, finally the emergency beacon that would call for help if something went wrong. Each piece of equipment represented safety and caution, but also barriers between himself and the ancient weapon. "What are you doing?" Fluxmind Zephon asked with alarm. "The energy radiations from that sword could be lethal to biological systems." "The architects were biological once," Taeho replied, setting his last piece of equipment aside. "If they wanted to create something that would harm younger species, they would not have spent millions of years waiting for us to find it." Jinwoo's scanner was beeping frantically. "Taeho, the quantum readings are off all scales. The sword is responding to your approach in ways we have never seen before." Taeho stepped closer until he was standing directly beside the pedestal. The crystalline blade was beautiful beyond description. Light seemed to flow through it like liquid starlight, and its edges appeared sharp enough to cut through the fabric of space itself. But more than its beauty, Taeho felt the weapon's incredible age and patience. This sword had waited in quantum suspension while entire civilizations rose and fell. It had seen species transcend physical existence and others destroy themselves through war and stupidity. Through it all, the weapon had maintained its vigil, waiting for beings who could appreciate both its power and its purpose. "I am not the strongest person here," Taeho said, speaking to the sword as much as to his teammates. "I am not the smartest or the most advanced. I will grow old and die while some of you exist for thousands of years." Yuna was reading frantically from her translation tablets. "Taeho, the new symbols say something about accepting yourself as you are while never stopping your journey to become more." "That is exactly how I feel," he replied, reaching out slowly toward the sword's hilt. "I know I am limited and mortal, and sometimes wrong about things, but I also know that every day brings new possibilities to learn and grow and discover." His fingers touched the leather wrapped around the sword's handle. The material felt warm and alive despite its obvious age. No energy field threw him back. No alarms sounded. The weapon simply waited for his decision. Memories flashed through Taeho's mind, but they were not his own memories. He saw brief images of humanity's history from an outside perspective. Cave paintings created by people who had never seen the stars but dreamed of reaching them anyway. Ancient philosophers asking questions they knew they could never fully answer. Scientists making discoveries that led to new questions rather than final answers. He saw humanity's wars and mistakes and failures, but also their refusal to give up hope. Every time his species faced extinction or despair, they found ways to adapt and survive and try again. They never achieved the perfect harmony of Crystal Singer Nith's people or the complete transcendence of Fluxmine Zephon's race, but they never stopped trying to become better than they were. The sword is not just testing me, Teho realized, aloud. It is testing all of humanity through me, our entire species' approach to existence and growth in the future. He gripped the hilt more firmly and felt the weapon respond, not with resistance, but with something like recognition. The Void Render had been created by beings who understood that the journey mattered more than the destination. They had preserved it for species who shared that understanding. Slowly, carefully, Teho lifted the sword from its ancient resting place. The weapon came free with no effort at all. It felt perfectly balanced in his hands, despite its obvious power. The crystalline blade hummed with energies that made his teeth ache, but also filled him with a sense of infinite possibility. Light exploded through the chamber, but it was not blinding. Instead, it revealed hidden details that had been invisible before. The walls were covered with star maps, showing routes to unknown regions of space. Technical diagrams displayed technologies that could revolutionize science and medicine. Most importantly, symbols appeared that promised the locations of other repositories hidden throughout the galaxy. Commander Veltar staggered backward in shock. Impossible. The readings show that sword contains enough energy to power our entire fleet for a century. Crystal Singer Nith's body blazed with rainbow light as she processed what she was witnessing. The quantum fields are stabilizing into configurations that create permanent bridges between dimensions. This weapon can cut through space and time itself. But Teho barely noticed the displays of advanced technology. He was focused on the responsibility he now carried. The sword had chosen not just him, but his entire species to inherit the architect's legacy. Humanity would have access to knowledge and power beyond their wildest dreams. The question was whether they would use it wisely. "Jin Wu," he said quietly, "start recording everything. This information needs to be preserved and shared carefully." Yuna was already working on translating the newly revealed star maps. "Teho, these charts show the locations of dozens of hidden facilities. Libraries, research stations, manufacturing centers left by the architects." Yunsu approached with military caution but obvious respect. "How does it feel? The sword?" Teho considered the question carefully. "Like holding a responsibility instead of a weapon. The architects did not preserve this for conquest or domination. They preserved it for exploration and discovery." Sora's holographic image was analyzing the revealed technologies with growing excitement. The implications are staggering. Medical advances that could eliminate most diseases, energy systems that could power entire worlds without pollution, transportation methods that could make interstellar travel as easy as crossing a room. Flux mind. Zephon pulsed with what might have been wonder. And they entrusted all of this to the youngest and least advanced species in this expedition. Not the least advanced, Teho corrected gently. The most capable of advancement. The architects knew that stagnant civilizations would use their gifts to maintain power, but growing civilizations would use them to keep growing. The sword pulsed in his hands as if agreeing with his words. Around the chamber, ancient systems continued activating, preparing to share secrets that had been hidden for millions of years. But even as he marveled at the technological wonders being revealed, Teho knew the real test was just beginning. Now humanity had to prove they deserved the trust the architects had placed in them. The sword in Taiho Kim's hands continued to reveal its secrets as the hours passed. What had begun as a simple archaeological expedition was becoming the most important discovery in galactic history. Technologies that could revolutionize every aspect of civilization were being displayed on the temple walls, like gifts waiting to be unwrapped. Dr. Yuna Li worked frantically to document the star charts and technical diagrams that appeared. with each pulse of the sword's energy. Tae-ho, I count at least 47 different facility locations across this spiral arm of the galaxy. Each one appears to contain different aspects of architect knowledge. A new arrival interrupted her. Translation work. Mi Young-song materialized in the chamber as another holographic projection, her image transmitted from the research vessel orbiting overhead. The xenobiologist had been studying the energy readings from space and requested immediate access to the discovery. The quantum signatures visible from orbit are unlike anything in our databases, Mi Young reported, her holographic form examining the revealed technologies with obvious excitement. These manufacturing processes could revolutionize biotechnology and medicine across all known species. Jinwoo Park was recording everything with multiple scanners, his engineering background helping him understand the mechanical principles being displayed. The power generation systems alone could solve the energy crisis facing most developing worlds. Clean, unlimited power that works by tapping into the quantum foam itself. Commander Veltar stood in stunned silence, his yellow eyes fixed on Tae-ho and the sword that had rejected every member of his proud warrior species. This cannot be real. Humans are barely capable of interstellar travel. How can they be chosen to inherit such power? Crystal Singer Ninth's crystalline body flickered with complex patterns as she processed the philosophical implications. Commander, perhaps that is exactly why they were chosen. The architects knew that advanced species would use this knowledge to maintain their current position. Humans will use it to grow beyond their current limitations. The sword pulsed again, and Tae-ho felt a strange sensation wash over him. For a brief moment, he experienced consciousness from the architect's perspective. He saw the universe not as a human, but as beings who had transcended physical existence millions of years ago. Through their eyes, he understood their incredible journey from biological entities like humanity to beings of pure consciousness capable of reshaping reality with thought alone. But he also felt their regret. In gaining unlimited power, they had lost something precious. The excitement of discovery, the joy of growth, the satisfaction of overcoming challenges through creativity and determination. They miss being like us, Tae-ho said with sudden understanding. The architects achieved everything they thought they wanted, but in becoming perfect, they lost the ability to experience wonder. Flux Mind Zephon swept closer, his energy form pulsing with interest. What do you mean, human? The sword is showing me their memories, Tae-ho explained, still gripping the crystalline hilt. They remember what it felt like to struggle and learn and discover new things. That is why they preserved all this knowledge for younger species. They want someone else to experience the joy of exploration that they can no longer feel. Hyunsu Kang approached with military precision, but also deep respect. That explains why the test was designed the way it was. They were not looking for the most advanced beings. They were looking for beings who still possessed the drive to become more than they currently are. Sora Choi's holographic image nodded from where she was analyzing the cultural implications. It makes perfect sense from an anthropological perspective. Every civilization eventually reaches a point where it stops growing. But the architects found a way to preserve the growth potential by passing it to others. The sword's energy reached a crescendo, and suddenly Tae-ho understood its true purpose. The weapon was not meant to be claimed permanently by any individual or species. Instead, it served as a key that would unlock different levels of architect. Knowledge as humanity proved ready for each stage of advancement. The inheritance is not just the technologies, he realized. It is a gradual education system. The architects designed it to help younger species grow responsibly instead of being overwhelmed by power they are not ready to handle. Mi Young-song's hologram brightened with excitement as she studied the biological technologies being revealed. The medical advances shown here could extend human lifespan by centuries while maintaining our capacity for growth and change. We could live long enough to see the fruits of our curiosity without becoming stagnant like other long-lived species. Jinwoo was documenting the engineering principles with growing awe. The manufacturing systems can create materials that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ships built with this technology could travel between star systems in days instead of years. Yuna found a crucial passage in the newly revealed texts. According to this, the sword will remain active as long as humanity continues to grow and explore. But if we ever become satisfied with our achievements and stop reaching for new possibilities, it will deactivate and wait for the next worthy species. A built-in safeguard, Hyun-soo observed with military appreciation. The architects made sure their legacy could never be used to create permanent stagnation. Commander Veltar finally spoke, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and sadness. My people conquered death itself. We believed that made us superior to all other species. But in eliminating the possibility of ending, we also eliminated the urgency to keep beginning. Crystal Singer Ninth's crystalline form pulsed with understanding. The Viridians achieved perfect thought patterns that never change or decay. We believed we had reached the ultimate state of existence. But perfection means never having anything left to discover. Flux mind. Zephon's energy field dimmed with something like melancholy. The luminary transcended physical bodies entirely. We thought we had achieved the highest possible evolution. But without physical limitations to overcome, we stopped finding new ways to grow. Tae-ho felt the sword's weight in his hands and understood the incredible responsibility it represented. The architects are offering humanity a choice. We can use their knowledge to become like them, transcendent and powerful, but also finished. Or we can use it to remain eternally curious, always growing, always discovering new frontiers. What will you choose? Mi-young asked from her holographic projection. Tae-ho looked around the chamber at his human teammates and alien colleagues. The technologies displayed on the walls could solve most of humanity's current problems. They could bring about an age of prosperity and advancement beyond anything his species had ever imagined. But they could also lead humanity down the same path that every other advanced civilization had followed. The path toward perfection and ultimate stagnation. I choose growth, he said firmly, lifting the sword toward the chamber's ceiling. I choose to remain curious. I choose to keep asking questions even when we think we have all the answers. The sword blazed with brilliant light that filled the entire temple. When the glow faded, Tae-ho gently placed the weapon back in its pedestal. The void render settled into its quantum suspension state, but now it was connected to humanity. It would provide knowledge and technology as his species proved ready for each new level of responsibility. The sword stays here, he announced. It belongs to all species who still dare to dream of becoming more than they are. Humanity will share what we learn, but we will never claim ownership of wisdom that belongs to the entire universe, Commander. Veltar stepped forward and performed a formal Saurian salute. Human Tae-ho Kim, you have my respect. Perhaps there is hope for my people to rediscover the growth we abandoned long ago. Crystal Singer Ninth's crystalline body sang with harmonious tones. The Viridians would be honored to learn from humanity's example. Fluxmind Zephon pulsed with renewed energy. The Luminari have much to remember about the value of continuous discovery. As the expedition team prepared to return to their ships and share the incredible discovery with the galaxy, Tae-ho took one last look at the ancient sword. It waited patiently in its pedestal, ready to guide humanity and any other species that chose growth over stagnation. The architects had been gone for millions of years, but their greatest creation lived on. Not as a weapon of conquest, but as a teacher of wisdom. A reminder that the journey toward understanding was infinitely more valuable than any destination they might reach. Looking up at the alien sky through the temple's crystal dome, Tae-ho smiled. Somewhere among those stars were dozens of repositories waiting to be discovered. Each one would present new challenges, new opportunities to grow, and new reminders that the universe was far more wonderful and mysterious than any single species could ever fully comprehend. Humanity had been chosen not because they were superior, but because they still remembered how to be amazed. And as long as they held on to that capacity for wonder, the architect's legacy would continue to guide them toward futures they could not yet even imagine.